same town, by Alan Dwayne Penmanship. Chapter 1. Meet at Football Practice. The sun was still clinging to the last weeks of summer, hanging low and golden over Ridgeview Park. Kids were running drills on the football field, their cleats digging into the dry grass. Some had gear that looked fresh out the box. Others wore pads with duct tape patches and faded numbers. Andy Callahan stood near the sideline, a new white helmet tucked under his arm. His dad, Richard, a local architect, stood beside him in a polo shirt and loafers, calling out encouragement like a sideline coach. "You'll do fine, son. Just listen to the coach, run your routes, and hit clean," his dad said. Andy nodded, but his eyes weren't on his dad. He was scanning the field, taking in the players already throwing the ball around. His new cleats pinched a little, but he didn't complain. His mom had driven all the way across town to pick them up special last week. A whistle blew, and Coach Davis called the new kids to the middle of the field. That's when Andy saw him. Tony Jenkins jogged onto the grass, carrying a beat-up helmet in one hand and a water jug in the other. His gear looked like it had been through a few seasons already. Scuffed shoulder pads, hand-me-down jersey, cleats that looked a half size too small. He didn't come with a parent, just his older sister, Vanessa, who stood leaning on a chain-link fence, chewing gum and scrolling her phone. Tony gave a quick wave before heading to the circle. Coach Davis nodded to the group. "All right, new blood. Let's see what you've got." Andy Callahan, Tony Jenkins, you're first up. Quarterback drill. Andy and Tony exchanged a glance. Tony grinned and nodded like they'd already known each other. "Ready?" Tony asked. Andy paused. "Yeah." They lined up. Andy took the snap, dropped back, and watched Tony take off downfield. The boy could run fast, controlled, clean routes. Andy threw a perfect spiral. Tony caught it in stride and dashed across the end zone like he'd done it 100 times. Coach Davis blew his whistle. "That's what I'm talking about." The two boys slapped hands, and for the first time, Andy smiled. Not the polite smile he gave his parents or teachers. A real one, the kind you give when you meet someone who sees you, not just your name or your clothes. After practice, as the team gathered by the bleachers, Tony sat under a tree lacing his cleats. Andy walked over, holding 2 sports drinks. "Hey," Andy said, offering one. Tony took it, surprised. "Thanks. You're fast," Andy said. "You throw clean," Tony replied. They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. They had the game. They had the sweat, the bruises, and the feel of the field. Different neighborhoods, different lives, but something about the dirt and the discipline made them equals. From that day forward, they were always lined up side by side. Offense, defense, water breaks, and eventually trouble. And it all started right there, on a dusty football field where suburb met street. And 2 boys found a brotherhood neither of them saw coming. Chapter 2. One summer. That summer felt like it stretched forever. The kind of summer where the sun didn't set until you were too tired to notice, and the air always smelled like sweat, cut grass, and something cooking on somebody's grill. Andy and Tony spent nearly every day together after football started, riding bikes, walking to the park, or just wandering the town like they owned it. Andy's house in the valley was big, with a clean-cut lawn and a 3-car garage. His mom made turkey sandwiches with avocado, and his dad kept a stocked fridge of Gatorade in the garage for the boys. When Tony first came over, he couldn't stop looking around. "Yo, this your room?" Tony asked, staring at the flat screen mounted on the wall, the gaming chair, and the stack of Jordans lined up under the window. And he shrugged like it was no big deal. "Yeah, you want to play Madden or shoot hoops out back?" Tony nodded, but kept glancing around like he was visiting a celebrity house. Later that week, they hung out at Tony's place on the south side. The apartment complex was older, but clean. The air inside smelled like incense and fresh laundry. His dad sat at the kitchen table reading the paper, and his mom was folding towels on the couch. Spanish music played low in the background. Tony's older sister, Vanessa, was doing her nails on the porch and gave Andy a once-over when he walked in. "You Andy?" she asked, not looking up from her polish. "Yeah," he said. "She. Rich boy football star, huh?" Tony rolled his eyes. "Leave him alone." They went to Tony's room, small but neat, with posters of classic cars and rap icons on the wall. His bed had no frame, just a mattress on the floor, but everything was folded, stacked, and organized. "You want something to drink?" Tony offered. Andy nodded. The atmosphere wasn't what he was used to, but something about the place felt real. Solid. No pretending. They spent that summer running in two worlds, swimming at Andy's neighborhood pool and riding bikes to corner stores on Tony's side. They played pickup games with Andy's private school friends one day and chilled on the stoop with Tony's cousins the next. And both boys started copying each other without even realizing it. Andy picked up Tony's slang and loosened up around authority. Tony started noticing brands more: shoes, watches, cars. He wasn't trying to act like Andy. He just liked the taste of something better. One hot night in July, they snuck into the community pool after closing hours. The stars were out, the water still warm. They sat on the edge, letting their feet dangle in the shallow end. "You ever think about, like, the future?" Tony asked suddenly. Andy shrugged. "Not really. I guess I'll go to college or work for my dad or something." Tony was quiet for a second. "I want to have my own business. Drive something nice. Travel. You know, not just survive." Andy looked over at him. "I never really thought about not surviving." That line hung in the air. They didn't know it then, but that summer was the last time things would feel that simple. The last time they could float between their worlds without feeling pulled to pick one. By the time school started again, they'd start noticing the lines more clearly, and crossing them wouldn't always be so easy. Chapter 3, Baseball 2. By the time spring came around, football season had faded into memory, but the bond between Andy and Tony hadn't. Coach Davis, always looking to keep talented kids out of trouble, recruited them both for the city summer baseball league. Andy wasn't sure at first. Baseball was slower, less hype, but Tony was all in. "You ever play shortstop?" Tony asked one afternoon as they walked to the practice field. "Nah, I usually pitch, or just try to hit bombs," Andy said with a grin. Tony laughed. "You swing like you're trying to kill something." The team was a mix. Some kids from private schools with monogram bats and new cleats, others from the south side who played barefoot in the street until they learned to catch with no glove. It didn't matter. On that field, everyone was equal, at least at first. Andy's swing was natural, smooth, powerful, but his focus? Scattered. Always checking his phone, joking around, trying to impress the girls who hung around the bleachers. Tony, on the other hand, played like he was hungry. Every ground ball, every throw, like it mattered. He stayed after practice, asked questions, took extra swings. The coach noticed. "You keep this up," Coach said one day, clapping Tony on the back, "and I might be making some calls for you next year." Tony's chest swelled with pride. But when he looked over, Andy was sitting on the bench, scrolling through his phone with T-Rock and a couple of older guys, kids known more for skipping class than playing ball. That was the beginning. It wasn't a big blow-up, just little things. Andy started skipping practice here and there. Said his dad was pressuring him too much, or his sister needed help, or he just wasn't feeling it. Truth was, he didn't like how serious it was getting. He didn't like how Tony was starting to shine brighter. He started hanging out more with T-Rock and some of the older boys from school, the ones with loud laughs, fast talk, and even faster cars. They smoked cigarettes behind the gym and made fun of the kids who still cared too much. One night, after practice, Tony waited by the dugout with his glove under his arm. Andy had promised they'd go grab food, but he never showed. Instead, Tony saw him drive by in the passenger seat of a black Camaro, music blasting, a girl in the back laughing too hard to care who was watching. Tony didn't say anything the next time he saw him, just nodded like everything was cool. Andy noticed the silence, but didn't ask about it. He didn't know how to explain that he didn't want to be the kid with everything. He wanted edge. He wanted to prove he could hang, even if it meant dumbing himself down to do it. One weekend, Tony invited Andy to help him run his lawn cutting route, a little side hustle he started to save up for a new glove. Andy agreed, but never showed. Said he had family stuff. Later, Tony saw photos on social media. Andy poolside at a barbecue, shirtless, surrounded by people who'd never even stepped foot in Tony's neighborhood. That's when it started to click for Tony. Some people were trying to climb up. Others were trying to fall down just to feel real. It didn't mean he stopped caring about Andy, but he started caring more about himself. Chapter 4. Same high school. Freshman year at East Ridge High felt like stepping into a whole new world. Hallways flooded with students of every kind: athletes, nerds, stoners, fashion kids, and the ones who didn't seem to belong to any group at all. Lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked on tile, and rumors floated faster than morning announcements. Andy and Tony had made it to the same high school, barely. Tony tested into East Ridge's magnet program. Andy's parents had used their zip code advantage and reputation to breeze him in. Same school, different schedules. They still saw each other: lunch, gym, the occasional walk to class. But something had changed. Andy had started wearing his dad's old chain and kept his hoodie half-zipped to show it. His new crew was mostly juniors and seniors who barely passed, but drove beat-up cars and acted like they ran the place. They called themselves the Lot Boys, always posted outside the back lot, vaping or clowning around between classes. Most of them had more detentions than credits. Tony stuck close to a different circle: honor roll kids, a few athletes, and a couple of quiet types who stayed out the way. He still dressed clean, still worked weekends with his pops, and still dreamed about owning a business one day. But that didn't mean he didn't feel the pull of the other side, especially when it came to girls. There was one girl in particular, Maya, smart, funny, and stunning. She floated between both worlds, with a smile that could make any guy feel like a king and a stare that could freeze them solid. Andy and Tony both liked her. At first, it was unspoken, a look here, a casual mention there. But one day, Maya smiled at Tony in the lunch line, and Andy noticed. "Yo," he said later that day, catching up to Tony near the vending machines. "You talking to Maya?" Tony shrugged. "Why?" "No reason," Andy said, forcing a laugh. "Just a skin. I was thinking about asking her out." Tony raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" Andy nodded. "Why not?" Tony hesitated. He could have said something slick. He could have told Andy Maya already gave him her number. But he didn't. Instead, he said, "Go for it." Andy tried. Took her to a school dance. Bought her a fake gold bracelet. But Maya wasn't impressed by flash. She liked real. She liked honest. By the end of the semester, she was walking home with Tony after study group. That's when the cracks deepened. Andy started cutting class more often. He got caught smoking behind the gym with T-Rock and a senior named Lex who was already on probation. His grades dropped, but his reputation rose. He was the rich kid who didn't care, the suburban rebel. Tony kept his head down, but even he wasn't immune to the temptations. One night, after a football game, he and Maya ended up at a party in a neighborhood he didn't belong in. Someone handed him a beer. He took a sip, then another. The music was loud, the air hazy. And he showed up late with T-Rock, dapping people up, grinning like nothing in the world touched him. But when he saw Tony with Maya on the couch, his face tightened. "Yo," Andy said, walking over. "Come holla at me outside real quick." Tony stood up slowly. "Why?" "Just come on, bro." Outside, under the porch light, the tension snapped. "You knew I liked her," Andy said, low and sharp. "You said go for it," Tony replied, cool but ready. "I was just trying to be chill." "You knew what it was." Tony shook his head. "You want every part of my life that's hard so you can feel something, but not the part where I gotta earn it. Maya likes people who show up." Andy clenched his jaw. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to swing. Instead, he laughed. "Whatever, man. You think you're better than me now?" Tony stared back. "No, just not trying to be worse." That night marked a turning point. They didn't stop being friends. But something was fractured, and in high school, fractures only grow. Here's Chapter 5, The Gang, where Andy and Tony both face the growing pull of the crowd around them. This is the point where things start to shift from harmless fun to real consequences. Chapter 5, The Gang. By sophomore year, the line between fun and trouble had gotten blurry. It started small, ditching class to hang in the parking lot, skipping homework to cruise around the neighborhood, late-night texts about meetups that turned into minor chaos. But slowly the stakes grew. They weren't officially in a gang, not the way the news or movies showed it. No colors, no initiation. But the crew had a name, The Lot. A rotating circle of kids with loud mouths and short tempers who smoked more than they studied. Andy was part of it now, whether he realized it or not. Tony stayed near the edges. He didn't wear the hoodies with Lot spray painted on the sleeves. He didn't show up to every hangout. But he knew the guys, and they knew him. And when you grew up where Tony did, Knowing people could mean protection or pressure. One Friday night, a group text went out. T-Rock, meet at the back alley by Jensen's. We finna grab something light. You in? Tony saw it, but didn't reply. He was supposed to work with his dad that weekend. Yard jobs lined up in the nicer part of town. He tossed his phone on the bed and told himself to ignore it. But 30 minutes later, Andy called. Yo, come through. It's just a quick hit. Nothing major. You coming or what? Tony sighed. Man, I'm trying to stay out the dumb stuff. You scared? Andy said, half laughing. Tony didn't answer. That pause said more than words. The alley behind Jensen's Electronics was dark, lit only by a blinking sign across the street and the glow of a cigarette in T-Rock's mouth. Andy, Lex, and a couple other boys were already there, hoodies up, eyes darting around. Tony showed up last, hands in his pockets, hoodie zipped all the way up. What's the move? He asked. Simple, T-Rock said, pointing toward the side door. Lex pops the back lock. We run in, grab what we can from the shelves, headphones, maybe a phone or two, then we out. 5 minutes. Tony felt his stomach twist. That's felony level stupid. Andy shrugged. Then don't grab anything. Just be the lookout. That's how it happened. One moment Tony was pacing by the dumpsters, heart pounding. The next, flashing lights turned the alley blue and red. Go! Someone yelled. The crew scattered. Tony ducked behind a bin. Andy tripped over a trash can. Lex dropped a duffel full of electronics. Tires squealed in the distance. A voice barked over a megaphone. Tony could have run, but Andy didn't. Tony doubled back. When the cops arrived, they found the boys sitting on the curb. One duffel bag, one broken phone, and 2 sets of scared eyes. Hours later, Andy sat in the back seat of his parents' SUV, pale and quiet. His dad said nothing. His mom kept shaking her head. You were supposed to be better than this, she whispered. Tony didn't get a ride home. His dad showed up in a work shirt and boots, face stone cold. The ride back was silent until they hit the freeway. You want to be another number? His dad asked. No, sir. You want to throw away everything we work for because some rich kid don't know who he is? Tony looked out the window. I didn't even grab anything. Doesn't matter. You were there, and now your name's in the system. By Monday, the story had already spread. The lot was proud. Andy had clout now. The rich kid who kept it real. Everyone whispered his name with respect. Tony? No one said much. Except Maya. You good? She asked at lunch. Define good, Tony replied. You didn't deserve that, she said. Tony forced a smile. Neither did my record. That night, Andy texted him. Thanks for not saying nothing. I owe you. Tony didn't reply. Not because he was angry. Not because he wanted revenge. Because he was starting to realize something. Andy was trying to lose himself in the life Tony was still trying to escape. And the deeper they went, the harder it would be to climb back out. Chapter 6. Cars and Motorcycles. Junior year came with more freedom, and with that, more danger. Andy turned 17 in March. 2 weeks later, he rolled up to school in a silver BMW coupe, a gift from his parents for staying on track. His dad handed him the keys with a proud grin. His mom snapped a photo for Instagram. But instead of driving it to internships or study groups like they hoped, Andy used it to slide through back streets with T-Rock riding shotgun. Music up, seat leaned back. Tony, on the other hand, had saved for over a year, cutting grass, running errands, fixing fences, anything. He finally bought himself a used Yamaha motorcycle, black and loud, with scratches on the sides and no license plate holder. It wasn't much, but it was his. When he pulled up on it that first day, helmet under his arm, Maya met him at the school gate. That yours? She asked, smiling. Paid in full, he said. She nodded. Looks like freedom. He laughed. Feels like it too. Cars and bikes became the new currency. If you had wheels, you had status. The lot boys started racing out on the edge of town, old industrial roads with barely any traffic and no lights. They called it the Strip. No rules, just engines and ego. Andy, desperate to prove he could hang, showed up night after night. He'd let Lex or T-Rock borrow his BMW just to gain clout, not realizing they were using him for the access more than the friendship. Tony came out a few times, but kept his distance. He knew what a blown engine or a missed turn could cost. One Friday night, everything almost changed. The race was simple, BMW versus a souped-up Mustang from the next town over. Big money riding on it. Nearly $1,000 in side bets. Andy was behind the wheel, windows down, smirking like he had something to prove. "Don't do this," Tony said, pulling up beside him on his bike. Andy looked over. "Why not?" "'Cause this ain't about the car. It's about you needing to be somebody you're not." Andy paused, then revved the engine. "Or maybe it's about showing people I'm not soft." Tony pulled off without another word. The race started with a blur of smoke and rubber. The Mustang launched. Andy chased. Halfway down the strip, a dog darted out into the street. Andy swerved hard, tires squealing. The BMW clipped a pole and spun into a ditch. The Mustang kept going. When Tony doubled back and saw the smoke rising, his heart dropped. He found Andy climbing out of the wreckage, bleeding from the forehead, laughing like it was a joke. "Bro, that was wild." Tony stared. "You could have died." Andy's grin faded. "But I didn't." "You're gonna run out of chances, man." Andy's parents grounded him for a month. Took the car. Pulled him from all extracurriculars. He played it cool at school, but Tony could tell it shook him. Still, nothing changed. Andy started borrowing rides. He was hooked, not on the thrill of driving, but on the rush of being noticed. Of not being just a rich kid. Tony focused harder. Picked up more jobs. Replaced parts on his bike himself. He knew what it meant to value what you earned. But even he started to feel the pressure. The world kept asking, "What you driving? What you wearing? What you got?" No one ever asked, "What are you building?" By the end of the semester, the gap between Andy and Tony had never been wider. But one wrong night would bring them closer again, whether they liked it or not. Chapter 7. Caught Stealing. It started with a plan. A dumb one. T-Rock had the idea. Lex hyped it up. Andy didn't say no. And Tony, well, Tony didn't say yes either. But he was there. It was supposed to be simple. A quick grab from a high-end boutique downtown. The place catered to influencers and trust fund babies. Designer shoes, gold chains, and $1,000 belts. Easy flip. Low risk, high reward. The owner's out of town. "My cousin works security. Said no one's there after 7, T-Rock claimed. Andy leaned back on the curb, flicking ashes. "So what's the move?" "In through the service door. Grab what's in reach. Dip in under 5. Tony frowned. "That's breaking and entering. Not just grabbing. You in or not?" Lex asked. Tony hesitated. His mind flashed. His dad's tired eyes, his mom's side hugs after long shifts, his little niece always asking for piggyback rides. They didn't raise him for this. "I'll drive," he said, finally. Thursday night, they rolled up in Andy's mom's SUV. He'd taken it without asking. Borrowing, he called it. Tony sat behind the wheel, engine running, nerves shot. The others disappeared around the side. 3 minutes passed. Then shouting. Then glass shattering. Then sirens. Tony's gut dropped. He threw the car into reverse, ready to bail, but he saw Andy trip over the curb, a bag full of watches spilling on the sidewalk. Tony cursed, jumped out, grabbed Andy by the collar, and pulled him in. They sped off, hearts pounding, minds racing. No one said a word for 2 full blocks. Then Lex burst out laughing. "We did it, bro. We actually did it." Tony didn't laugh. He just gripped the wheel tighter. The next morning, Andy's phone rang nonstop. Texts from T-Rock. Calls from Lex. But also unknown numbers. Then a knock at the door. Detectives. Security footage was clearer than expected. The SUV plate was visible. A neighbor had snapped a picture. The only person not caught on camera? Tony. He wasn't in the store. He wasn't seen grabbing anything. Just a blurry side profile in the driver's seat. But Andy? He was front and center, face in the glass reflection, caught with a chain in each hand. Tony's dad didn't yell. He just stared at him across the kitchen table. "You driving criminals now?" he asked, calm and disappointed. Tony looked down. "I didn't go inside." "You knew." Silence. "You knew," his dad repeated. "That makes you part of it." Andy's parents hired a lawyer. Expensive, aggressive, capable of erasing the word felony like it was a typo. Tony got a court-appointed public defender. They sat on opposite benches in juvenile court, both dressed in button-down shirts that didn't quite fit. Andy got probation, community service, and a sealed record. Tony got 6 months at a youth facility for aiding and abetting. 6 months. 6 months of cold bunk beds and loud nights. 6 months of group sessions and job assignments. 6 months of learning how quiet the world can get when your phone is gone and your friends forget to write. Andy visited once. They sat at a scratched plastic table under flickering lights. Andy looked smaller than usual, like the guilt had shrunk him. "I'm sorry," he said. Tony nodded. "I know. I should have said it was all me." "You didn't." Andy looked away. Tony stared at his hands, callous now, stronger. "Maybe I needed this," he said, "to slow down, to reset." Andy said nothing. When Tony got out, things had changed. He wasn't just the kid from the urban side of town anymore. He was the kid who took the fall. And now he had something to prove. Chapter 8. Fresh out. The gate buzzed open just past sunrise. Tony stepped out in the same jeans he'd walked in wearing, a duffel over his shoulder and a cold wind hitting his face like a challenge. His mom was parked outside, engine running, tears already in her eyes. He slid into the front seat, nodded a quiet hey. She squeezed his hand. "Welcome home, baby." But it didn't feel like home anymore. The neighborhood looked smaller. People looked older. And Tony felt heavier but clearer. No one said it, but they all knew. He was the kid that did the time. Some boys respected him for it. Others avoided him like jail was contagious. But Tony didn't care. He wasn't chasing image anymore. He got a part-time job in an auto shop run by his cousin. Started saving again. Cut his hair short. Stayed off social media. He walked like a man who had plans, not something to prove. He didn't know where Andy fit into those plans anymore. Andy didn't visit again. Not after that one time. He'd sent a few texts when Tony got out. "Glad you're home, bro. Let's link soon. You good?" But Tony never replied. Meanwhile, Andy was unraveling. On paper, life was fine. Same school, same girlfriend, same parties, same Instagram stories of concerts and rooftop views. But inside, he was drowning. He couldn't look his dad in the eye. His mom cried quietly when she thought he was asleep. The guilt clung to him like smoke, not from the crime, but from the silence. Tony did time, and he got to just move on? It didn't feel right, but Andy didn't know how to make it right. So he distracted himself. With parties, with girls, with pills, small ones. Study helps, someone called them. Soon, it wasn't just for studying. One Friday night, Andy showed up at the lot, the strip where the boys used to race. T-Rock was there. So was Lex. And so was the crowd. Louder, wilder, drunker. But it felt empty. Andy saw a group huddled around someone's car, cheering as a guy poured tequila into a girl's mouth from the roof. He used to love this energy. Now it made his stomach turn. He slipped away, sat on the hood of his old BMW, now dented, dusty, barely holding on, and stared at the moon. He pulled out his phone, opened Tony's contact, typed, "I don't even know if you'll read this, but I'm messed up, bro. I ain't slept in days. You was the real one. I didn't say it then, but I owe you." He hovered over send, paused, deleted it. The next morning, Tony was under a car at the shop, wrench in hand, when a familiar voice called out. "Yo, Tony." He rolled out slowly, covered in grease, squinting in the sun. Andy stood there, hands in pockets, wearing a hoodie too clean for this part of town. "Need an oil change," Andy said, forcing a grin. Tony didn't smile back. Andy held his eyes. "I came to say thank you." Tony stared. "You said it. And to ask if we could talk. Really talk." Tony wiped his hands on a rag, tossed it over his shoulder. "Clock out's at 5, he said. Then he rolled back under the car. By sundown, they were sitting on a curb, sharing a soda, no phones, no crowd. Just two kids from the same town. One who'd lost time, one who'd lost himself, and a question unspoken between them. What now? Chapter 9. Going to work. There's a point in every young man's life where the world stops waiting. No more next year. No more someday. Just bills, responsibilities, and time that doesn't stop for anyone. For Andy and Tony, that time had arrived. Tony clocked in at 6:45 a.m. sharp, 5 days a week. At the auto shop, sweat mixed with motor oil. Customers were impatient. The pay was light. But the pride? That was real. He fixed brakes, rotated tires, rebuilt engines like puzzles he couldn't afford to mess up. Some days, he went home too tired to eat. Others, he stayed late helping his cousin tune old Mustangs. He wasn't rich, but he was building. Quietly. Steadily. And he tried everything. Internships, desk work, even Uber. But nothing clicked. He wasn't afraid of hard work, just bored by it. His mind wandered. His fingers twitched. Every 9 to 5 felt like a slow death. His dad offered him a job at the law firm. Andy turned it down. "I want to do something real," he said. His dad stared. "What's real to you, son?" Andy didn't answer. They started hanging out again, not like before. No wild parties. Just late-night talks in empty parking lots or casual walks after work. One night, Tony handed Andy a wrench. "Help me change this alternator." Andy groaned. "I don't know what I'm doing." Tony smiled. "That's never stopped you before." They laughed. And for the first time in a long time, it felt right. Then came Slim, a name from the past. Older now, sharper, louder. Slim was one of those guys who never really grew up, just got slicker. He wore designer shoes, but had no job. Drove a Benz with no plates. Always had cash, but no receipts. He pulled up one night while the boys were grabbing pizza. "Y'all working hard," he grinned, gold teeth flashing. "But y'all ever get tired of crumbs?" Andy glanced up. "What do you got in mind?" Tony kept eating. Slim leaned in, lowered his voice. "Word is a private collector got diamonds sitting in a penthouse up off Ridgeway. No security. No alarm. No guard dogs. Just glass and greed." Tony shook his head before Slim even finished. "Nah." Slim smirked. "Ain't talking smash and grab. I'm talking in and out. No drama. No mess." Andy looked at Tony. "We said we was done." Tony didn't speak, just stared at the steam rising off his slice. That night, Andy couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling of his room, trophies collecting dust, shoes he barely wore anymore. He remembered the thrill, the feeling of doing something. Then he remembered Tony's face in court. He grabbed his phone. There was a long pause. They met under the bridge they used to ride bikes across as kids. Tony pulled a folded sheet of paper from his jacket, a hand-drawn map. "You sure?" Andy asked. Tony didn't smile. "This time we do it smart. No crew, no noise, no mistakes." Andy nodded. And just like that, they shook hands. No words, no celebration. Two young men from opposite sides of town. One trying to escape boredom, one trying to take control. Both about to risk everything. Chapter 10, The Heist. They chose a Tuesday. Quiet. Predictable. The kind of day no one expects anything bold to happen. The penthouse belonged to a reclusive collector known for flaunting wealth and trusting too much in privacy. He stored pieces worth hundreds of thousands. Vintage watches, heirloom diamonds, even a rumored blue sapphire ring that once belonged to royalty. Andy and Tony had studied the building for weeks. Tony tracked cleaning staff schedules. Andy monitored patterns of foot traffic through nearby coffee shops, Uber drop-offs, and security lapses. They mapped entrances, watched for cameras, timed the elevator. This wasn't recklessness, it was surgical. 10:27 p.m. Dressed in black. Gloves on, Bluetooth earpieces buzzing with light static. They moved like shadows through the alley. Tony picked the back service door. It clicked open in under 40 seconds. Up 16 flights using the freight stairs. No one passed them. Tony's breath was steady, focused, every step calculated. Andy, on the other hand, was vibrating, excitement, fear, the rush of being on the edge again. They reached the penthouse. Andy handled the keypad. It was newer tech, but nothing he hadn't seen before. 2 minutes. Door open. They slipped inside. The room was silent, modern, cold, and drowning in luxury. Glass walls overlooked the city. A chandelier, shaped like a comet, sparkled above them. The safe was where they expected, behind a faux bookshelf in the study. Tony opened his duffel, drills, magnetized rods, code breakers. Time passed in tight gasps. Click. The safe cracked. Inside, velvet trays glistening with rings, bracelets, and a watch so clean it looked like light itself. They didn't take everything, just the most valuable, the easiest to flip, the least likely to be traced. Tony paused before closing the duffel. "Last one," he said, and he nodded, jaw tight. 11:44 p.m. Back on the street. No alarms. No sirens. No witnesses. They walked away like nothing happened. Split up 2 blocks later. No words. Only eye contact. A silent pact. We did it. Now we disappear. The next week was like holding their breath underwater. They cleaned the jewelry, moved it in pieces, sold through private channels Tony had researched during his time away. Collectors, not criminals. No heat came. No news broke. No missing persons. No warrants. No cops. They pulled off. Andy used his share to leave town. Not far, just enough to breathe. He rented a small apartment near the coast. Enrolled in a business certification program. Something with a future. No flashy cars. No wild stories. Just space. Freedom. And silence he could live with. Tony paid off his parents' mortgage. Quietly, he started a custom auto shop with his cousin. Got a logo. Alone. A line outside the door. He drove a beat-up Chevy and smiled more. But at night, he still thought about it. Not the heist, but the moment after. When they walked out into the night, hearts pounding, heads high, no turning back. It wasn't the crime that stuck with him. It was the choice. They didn't talk much after that. Not because they were mad, but because they finally understood each other. The rich kid who wanted to feel real. The poor kid who wanted to feel free. Two lives that ran side by side, touched once in chaos, and changed forever by one night of silence and diamonds. The end. By Alan Dwayne Penmanship.